So, what if a religious belief that has shaped our world for thousands of years is actually based on a big misunderstanding? Today, we're going to unpack a fascinating theological argument that takes a fresh look at what the Bible really says, or maybe what it doesn't say about homosexuality. It's a view that challenges centuries of tradition. Think about that. For 3 millennia, one specific belief has been used to justify some really terrible things: persecution, humiliation, even death. It's a heavy topic for sure, but the interpretation we're exploring today goes right back to the beginning to re-examine the source. And this is the core question, isn't it? What if the foundation of that belief is shaky? We're going to break down how this theological argument is built, piece by piece, to see how it challenges the traditional reading of the Bible. But before we jump into ancient texts and theology, it's really important to ground this conversation in what's happening right now. Let's look at the real-world impact, as the source material describes it. As of today, in 12 countries around the world, homosexuality is still a crime punishable by death. I mean, this isn't ancient history we're talking about. It's a life or death consequence of how some people interpret religious law right now. And the source we're examining points to language like this to show the kind of verbal abuse the LGBTQ+ community often faces. The argument it makes is that this kind of rhetoric, which is so often tied to religious beliefs, can easily spill over into actual physical violence. Okay, so now let's get into the heart of the theological argument itself. It starts by going back to what the source calls God's foundational, universal law for every single human being. And here is the first major point this interpretation makes. You look at the 10 Commandments, these are supposed to be the big ones, the rules for everybody, and there is absolutely no mention of homosexuality. The thinking is, if this were a universal sin, wouldn't it be right here with murder and theft? So if it's not in the 10 Commandments, where does the condemnation actually come from? Well, the argument zeroes in on two very specific and very famous verses from the Old Testament. This verse, right here, from the book of Leviticus, this is one of the main scriptures used for centuries to condemn homosexuality. It's direct, it's harsh, and it has been incredibly powerful. But this reinterpretation hinges on one really critical question. And this is where the whole argument pivots. It stops looking at the verse in a vacuum and starts asking, wait a minute, who was the book of Leviticus actually written for in the first place? Well, the clue is in the name. Leviticus comes from the Greek word Levitikos, which literally means things relating to the Levites. And the Levites were a special class of priests. So the argument is that this book wasn't a set of laws for everyone, but a specific rule book for the clergy. To drive this point home, the source highlights other laws from the exact same book, like this one, which forbids shaving your beard with a razor. It's a rule that almost everyone, including people who quote other parts of Leviticus, completely ignores today. So when you put them side by side like this, you can see the core of the argument pretty clearly. It poses a simple question. If one of these rules from Leviticus is considered outdated and is no longer followed, why is the other one treated as a timeless universal law? It seems inconsistent. Okay, so that leads to the next logical question, right? If these rules were just for the Levite priests, what was the point of them? The argument offers a reason that's all about historical context. According to this interpretation, the goal was simple: make more people. The Hebrews were a tiny tribe, and they were surrounded by huge empires. Survival literally depended on growing their numbers, so any practice that didn't lead to procreation was outlawed for the priestly class to make sure the tribe would continue. It was a practical rule for a specific time and a specific purpose. All right, so now the argument jumps forward in time, moving to the New Testament, where it suggests that Jesus basically took this entire complicated legal code and simplified it fundamentally. The source we're looking at says there were 613 of these laws for the Levite priests. I mean, 613 rules covering everything from what you could eat, to how you worshipped, to how you groomed yourself. But then, according to the New Testament, Jesus comes along and boils all of those hundreds of complex laws down to just 2 core principles. And this, right here, is the theological peak of the argument. It's the idea that Christ created a totally new standard, that all 613 of those old laws were fulfilled and basically replaced by these 2 powerful commands: love God and love your neighbor. That's it. So finally, the source brings this entire interpretation into the modern day, and it offers what it calls a final clarification on the whole matter. Now, just to be clear, this explainer is outlining the specific argument from the source material, and that source asserts that a figure it identifies as a returned Christ, named Lord Rael, has officially reaffirmed that these two simple commandments are the only guiding principles we need. So the takeaway from this entire line of reasoning is this: sex is not inherently a sin. According to this teaching, the guilt and shame are totally unnecessary. The only rules that apply to any sexual relationship, no matter the orientation, are that it has to be consensual and it has to be responsible. So, we've just walked through this whole reinterpretation of Scripture, all the way from the Ten Commandments to the specific context of Leviticus and then to the teachings of Christ. The argument it makes is that religious laws aren't set in stone. They can evolve. And that leaves us with a pretty big question to think about. If divine laws can change to fit the times, what does that mean for the future of faith?